Okay, welcome to this tutorial on multi-body modelling. Here we're working with our Pulley project, the modelling that we've already learned how to do, but do it all in a singular part file using multi-body techniques to simplify the process. Use existing geometry, existing references to speed things up, and then at the end of that process, modelling all of the basic geometry in the singular part file. I'll go through the process of how you split them out to get back to single files which are often required by your suppliers, your contractors, for ease of communication, for specifying materials and finishes, etc. Or later drawings. It's just a different process, but it's good to know these different processes so you become more efficient as a designer, being able to select the better process for whatever project it is you're working on. So here you can see our finished project. Okay, our finished model looks almost exactly like our original pulley, but when we look in the feature tree here, you notice we haven't done the mates, we haven't gone over that area again, but we can see each of these features, each of these part files, the features that they come from are the stock of the multi-body pulley. That's showing you that these are child part files driven by a parent file. That parent file is this stock pulley multi-body. So to show you some differences between those parts, the original pulley parts and what we've got now, I think that one of the best ways to show that is to open up a part like the form bracket. So this form bracket, when we originally created this part as a single part file, we had an extrude for the basic geometry, we had a cut for the holes and curves on the bottom, and we had another cut for that top hole. Having used multi-body modelling method here, we don't have any of that in this file. This is the part file that we would send to the contractor. All that geometry is controlled in the master file. This file here just has a feature showing where the geometry has come from, this stock feature. And then for this part being sheet metal, we have converted it to sheet metal. So that is in this feature here. Another example we can look at is the pivot pin. So the pivot pin, you would remember, had 5 or 6 different features, including revolves, a couple of planes, cut through, fillet to create all the geometry. Here, multi-body part, all driven from this original file. So let's have a look at that original file now. To get to it, we can actually go editing context here to go back to that original file. And here you can see what we've created. So we're going to go through the process of creating this file. I'll show you some of the tips and tricks of multi-body. So how things are different in a multi-body file, how you can use your existing geometry as you build upon it to speed things up, and just a few sort of pointers to take into future lessons. Okay, let's go. Okay, so we're going to start here with a new part file, standard part file here, and we don't have to do anything different from if we're doing a part file for a single body when we're using multi-body. Let's get into some modelling, and then we can talk about some of the differences as they start to appear on screen. One of those differences is in your approach to the modelling. So what we've got on screen at the moment, I'm just going to bring in an old drawing set. So this is different to the drawings you've seen previously. This is from a second element of that Pulley project where students are asked to create a drawing set. We will look at a project like this at some stage. I'm referencing this because it's got all the dimensions I need to build these models, just like the previous files do, but this is all in one place, so I don't need to jump between 2 different files. All right, so that's the reason for that. The second thing, when we're starting off with a multi-body part, one of the most important things to do is to really focus in on what your first reference body is going to be. So, for instance, we don't want to start this model with something like the side plate or the reinforcing plate that's on the side, that's offset from the center, because it's not as important to the rest of the parts. Okay? Yeah, you want something that's central. Look, I'm always, when I'm doing it, I keep it pretty straightforward. I'm looking for something that is going to be in the center of my product. So either a front plane or top plane or right plane is going straight through the middle. Usually I'm designing symmetrical objects, so that helps a lot. Or another key thing I'm looking for is if there's an element or an OEM part that is sitting in a certain position, okay, that may be the reference. So a cavity to fit that product, that part may sit in that position, and we reference around that, or we've got something with a hole in it, or something that rotates around. So with the pulley here, quite an obvious one to start with is either the lower pulley point, okay, is that being your origin, or something to do with the form bracket and the pivot pin up the top. And starting reference points also is important to consider your method of doing your multi-body part file. So I've got kind of two methods I've set aside here. One of them is just starting with one body and then referencing parts as you go. The other is actually creating a driving sketch that drives your whole model. That is a method I'd rather use now for the product design that I do, but that does take a lot of practice. And often I find as I'm developing the design, I will go back to that driving sketch and add more information into it. So that's not always one where you know all the features that you're going to start with and you put them in a very first sketch. With this Pulley project here, we've got references, so we can do that. But in reality, as you're designing, things are changing. And so, you know, the way the file's set up is going to change as you go. So let's start just with the reference with that first method. We'll just build one part and then reference from that. And then later we can look at changing it to a driving sketch, because actually that's probably a worthwhile tool to have in your kit to know how to do that, to go from one to the other. Later in your project, when you're trying to set something up to be, let's say, fully controlled by that driving sketch. All right, so I'm going to start with the form bracket as my first part. So when we're sketching this first part, we'll do it exactly the same way we do with the original file. So we don't have to do anything different. Now let me just turn on a couple of features. That's tracker, yep, okay. Just checking my dimensions. This is going to be, I'm going to do the sim feature format that I did last time with internal radius 5. Is that right? 3. I've got in my drawing 3, so here's that. Okay. New tip for full round fillets. Thanks to Too Tall Toby for this one. When I click on this face and I need to go to the next selection, I don't have to go and click here in this box to then select my bottom face. I can actually just right click. You see the icon next to my cursor there with the arrow on the right mouse button. Right click that and then it goes to the next box. Right click OK. Beautiful. Problem with that on this feature though, can't do both sides at the one time. So just going to roll that back and do it the way I did in the original file. And what do we have? Whole size here, 13.2 and then a 3.0 and the size. So we're adding all the same, at this stage, we're adding all the same references and dimensions that we've done in the originals. Okay, through all, that one's done. Converting this to sheet metal, good question. I would leave that off. Good question, yeah, from me. But one of the things we do with multibody is we try and do all the basic features that we need in this first file. This will be our master file. And then when we split out the parts to create our assembly, in that split part file, that is where we could convert it to sheet metal. So you don't have to do it here. Now, I'm just going to save this, ready to continue. All right, make sure I don't lose that. Pulley model files, Pulley multi-body. Okay. All right, so that's where we would be last time. Okay, with a single part file, now we're going to build onto it. So let's do the washer. So the difference this time, I'll just go to a line view. I'm going to draw in my construction line in the middle. But now last time when we drew this washer, we would have referenced the origin and had some dimensions set from that and maybe use like the top plane. This time, we're going to use this bottom edge of the form bracket as our reference. All right, we do that because that washer sits in that position. Okay, in our finished assembly, our sub-assembly, the pivot pin that comes through, where the end of that has been pressed, formed, pushes back that washer up to that top surface. Look, in reality, maybe it'll have a 0.1, 0.2 millimeter gap, maybe some lubrication, but for this project here, it's coincident with that face. So as I'm sketching it, it's going to sit on that edge. So I'm going to go coincident there, and then I'm just going to draw the rest of the shape as we've done in the past. Okay, add my dimensions, Now I'm referencing my file. I've just moved it to the other screen so it's a bit clearer. This hole here, it's going to match that hole. So where this line is here, that can be collinear. All right, so I'm referencing that cut extrude edge to my new shape. All right, and that means I don't need to do a dimension for that 10.2 that's here. Leave that driving, but that's that reference one showing you where it sits. 45. And then let's get our radius in top, and outer dimension was 18. Okay, beautiful. Now, here is the key step when you're doing multi-body modeling. When you do a new boss, either extrude, revolve, sweep, loft, in this case going to do a revolve, I look here under my main options and I need to uncheck merge result. All right, that's it. At this stage, that's all I need to do. Uncheck merge result. What happens now, in my feature tree, you can see I've got a folder that says solid bodies, and in that I've got 2 separate solid bodies. That's it. This is now a multi-body part file. Now the difference is what happens when we uncheck that box. By default it's on. If I did check that box, you can go in and change things. This happens regularly when you're doing multi-body modeling. Press OK. That is going to merge that revolve with the existing extrude that we did. And so now they're joined together, all right? Which is no good if we wanted to split these apart into 2 different files to then build our assembly, do separate drawings of these files. We can't do it from this point, or we can do it. It's a lot more complicated. You have to go in, make duplicates of each, split them, make sure that, yeah, all the edges stuff remains the same. Don't worry about it, any about that. Don't want to worry about any of that. Uncheck, keep going, okay? So that one's done. Let's go on to the next more complicated one, which is that pivot pin. Now, we're getting to a point where we've got a couple of references here. So that's good. If we remember this shape, it's going something like this. A curve, it's the wrong spot. Just get that on that line. Get that vertical on the origin. We're going to have, this is going to be 10. Just make it 5 there, so that retains that little gap. So if we wanted to do this properly, what I'd probably do is dimension the gap, because the gap will drive it. Our hole that we've done earlier as 10.2 will actually drive the dimension of this. So if that hole changes to 8, this becomes, if that hole becomes 8.2, this would become 8. We'll see that a little bit later when we play a bit more with it, with the features. 5, 10, just getting everything fully defined. The angle here, 45, we can do that parallel, okay? That means that retains, that references that edge. So if we were to go into the revolve and change the revolve, it's going to change that for us too. Perfect. I might have had this 12 previously. I've got a 15 in this current drawing I'm looking at, so I'm just going to keep it there. And I think that's about it. Keep it nice. I'm going to bring that right down to that edge. There we go. So you can see there's quite a few points where I'm referencing the existing files. Okay, so this coincident relation with the bottom of the washer, this parallel edge with the inside of the washer, this 0.1 distance from the edge of that hole, this coincident relation with the top of the form bracket, all referencing existing bodies. Okay, features, revolve, and revolving around that middle line, again, uncheck merge result. Okay, you can see now I've got 3 solid bodies here. Now what you'll notice as we go, those bodies have names assigned to them, okay, in that solid bodies folder. The name of those bodies by default will be the last feature used to create that body. So here it's cut extrude 2, revolve 1 was that body, and then revolve 2. You can rename bodies by clicking. You can rename bodies by double clicking on them or right clicking and going, it's not rename tree item. But in my experience, those names don't stay changed. So, I might change that name and then later as I do more features, it's reverted back to whatever the latest feature is that's been added to it. So I don't really waste too much time on naming the individual bodies. What I will do is name folders, okay? Folders of the features creating that part. and I'll use those as reference. And we can start to do that now. In this file, a lot of these bodies are, only going to be 1 or 2 features, so there's not much to it. But when you get into more detailed product design and you're doing 20, 30, 40 features for one area of, or one aspect or one element, one body of a file, makes a lot more sense. The way that I do it in my current workflow is I will group a section of features to a certain area of geometry or a certain element of the design, and I will name them for that element or that geometry. Okay, not naming them for what part it is, because often my part files will have multiple features, geometry, elements, references from other parts that relate to lots of different things. So yeah, I'll show some examples later. To rename some files, you just click, you can either control click on them like so, or shift. Typically, you are wanting to group features into a folder, and those features are all already together in the feature tree. So they're in order. Excuse me. Here we can see the washer. It's only a single body or a single feature. So I could rename that revolve to washer. Or if I wanted consistency, I could create a folder, call it washer. However, get into this issue. Even though they're different types of things, one of them's a feature, one of them's a folder, even with a solid body, you can't name things with something that already exists. So it's really frustrating. I can't have a folder named washer and a revolve named washer. So typically I'd choose one or the other. Now, when you do create folders and they're there, you want to change them, remove them, etc., you can select a folder, press delete. It'll delete the folder. It's not going to delete the features inside. All right, so that's okay. The other thing you'll notice, as I've renamed that Revolve 1 washer, it's also renamed the solid body. All right, let's continue. So now I need those planes, 2 and 15. Now what's important this time is that I get the orientation of those ellipses in the right way, because I don't have the opportunity here to rotate that part around. So I'll make sure I get them facing the right direction, which is this way. And I'm going to use a similar trick that I did in the part video to have the ellipses reference each other. So first sketch is there, second sketch coming. Long day. Yeah, how am I going to do it? It got really messy last time having them on 2 different layers, so I'm actually going to convert this one up to this plane. Just hide my sketches for a second, and so I'll just draw lines this time. So line from there to there. Oh, is this even a good way of doing it? I don't know. There to there. Make them the same length. Maybe it'd be better with circles. Let's get back to this. Maybe it'd be better with circles. Having a large and a small circle. I've got 2 circles. That's okay. And 1, and then I don't need the duplicate. Okay, so I think this will work. So I have 1 circle on the outside for construction, and that is coincident with that one, and another circle for the inside for construction, coincident with that one. That works. Okay, that's much better than what I've done previously. Very simple. Okay, loft. Let's hide those planes. Let's do our loft. Gonna go edge, dot, dot, top view. Pretty well lined up. Cool. Now, there are a few more features, a few more options, in the loft feature than there is like the revolve. Sometimes it's harder to find that merge result tick button. Here we can actually see it's down here under options, merge result. So I'm going to uncheck that, although that's wrong. Let's go back. We want to keep merge result done in this case because this loft is actually going to be merged with the revolve that we've already done. The key is we don't want to merge it with everything else. Okay, so when we're selecting in our options here, excuse me for a second, yeah, go. When we're selecting in our options, feature scope is the box we want to look at. And we're going to uncheck auto select. That is the important one in this instance. In that box, we're going to select that revolve as the thing that we want to merge with. Okay, so we are merging only with that revolve. And then we can put in our constraints, similar to last time. Okay, and press the tick. In this way, that loft only merges with that bottom revolve, not with the other 2 bodies that we've already created. Cool. All right, so let's continue. Dome on the top, 9, elliptical, and then hole on the front, stuffed up there. That should be a cut extrude through all both, and fillet, normal fillet, 1mm internal face. Okay, good. I'm going to grab those planes and that revolve and put them all in a folder for pivot pin. Very good. Hey, so let's continue on from where we were at last time, finish off these parts, and then we'll go through how to start to split them apart and bring them back into an assembly. So I'm going to move a bit quicker through these remaining parts. First up, we have the bush, which we know last time was a pretty simple part. All you can do here is use the reference of the circle we've already cut in the form bracket to find the center point of where that bush is going to go. Now we know its dimension is 13. We can either put that 13 in, we can put the hole on the inside in, 10.2, or for that 13 on the outside, we can actually right click on that and see in the drop down here, if we press driven, it's going to turn that dimension gray and it's going to make that line underdefined, right? And then you can see as I move that line, the dimension changes to reflect what it is. Instead of dimensioning it as 13, we can actually dimension the clearance we want from this hole, 0.1. That will give us the bush size, 13 on the outside. So then, if for any reason we came through and changed the size of this hole, the size of that sketch is going to change with it. And now we start to get to some of the benefits of the multi-body modeling and the parametric system that we have here in SolidWorks to control things like diameters, dimensions, and lengths of things. And there's another example of that right here. So when we've extruded this bush previously, we may have started on the mid-plane and just gone 25mm either side. So mid-plane, 25mm. But now we have other geometry here that we can reference. Instead of direction 1 being blind or mid-plane, we can actually use up to surface. And instead we can select this face and then do direction 2, go the other direction and select this face, uncheck merge result, press OK. And now that bush is always going to go up to that end face of the form bracket. So if the form bracket dimension changes from 25 to 40, so too does the bush. So now we've got multiple elements of this bush part, this bush body, relating to the geometry of the form bracket. So one of those is that hole size, okay, that's in this cut extrude here. So if we change that, the size of the bush changes. And if we change the width of the bush changes. There we go. All right, let's continue. Next parts, let's put in the side plates. That way we'll have a position for our pulley wheel. Now for our side plate, we can actually use this surface to sketch on because we know the side plate is going to be right up against this face. So coincident. So when we do our new sketch, we can actually sketch it right on that plane. And I'm going to go through and build this pretty quickly. Just adding relations to make sure everything's fully defined. And I'm going to trim away the sections that I don't need, just like we did in the original. I'm going to draw all the holes in this central sketch here. Now, I can make those two equal. This size here, which is the size of that bush. And then my hole pattern, in my latest drawings, I made these holes a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to copy that circular sketch pattern. 5 instances. I can drag that back to the center. And then thickness this part, I think was 2mm. Yeah, so the key thing here, blind direction, 2mm, uncheck, merge result. Now, while I'm at it, I'll get the side reinforcing plate done at the same time as the very next step. So now I'm using the center point of this part as my reference for the center point of the bottom circle of this reinforcing plate. I don't need to dimension them separately. It's already going to reference that. So again, if for any reason that A to B dimension would change, we'd be covered. Okay, it would update again automatically. Just putting some radiuses in my sketch, and I'm going to convert these edges. So the Convert Entities tool, basically copying an edge or a face onto your current sketch plane, enabling you to use that geometry in your new sketch. Okay, make sure I save, and I'm just going to rename these features, bush, side plate, reinforcing plane. And if you missed it last time, when we go to our solid bodies folder here, which is starting to build up, we've got 6 bodies now. You can see they're named by the last feature used to create them. So fillet 1 here, we can change that to pivot pin, and this one we can change to form bracket. And this may help us when we want to split our parts later split our bodies into individual part files or into an assembly. So that's actually 6 out of 7 parts. We've got 1 part to go, that is the wheel. The wheel will be sketched on a different plane, and we can use that center line. So it'll be, I think it's between those two. I'm just using these as a reference geometry. Yep, that is the correct, not quite correct hole. You can see I'm actually going to this edge here instead of this one. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Make sure I get in the right position. All right, and now I can do the sketch as I did previously. So all the shortcuts that we did last time, they remain. Let's mirror it and then dimension it. Should not be coincident there. I will remove that. Okay, so 13.2. Now this edge is right there. This one was inset a little bit, 23, and then this one, 21. Yeah, that's 5. And the top radius of 12, and the total wheel size of 72. All right, revolve that, uncheck merge result, make sure it's not joining onto existing bodies. And now we can add the rest of our details. Now, a little trick here. Let me just turn on my shortcut shower for a second. So when you start to create a lot of solid bodies in your file, it can be more difficult to find the parts that you're working on. It can be more difficult to find the bodies that you're working on. So sometimes it's good to either hide or make bodies transparent, or isolate them. So isolating is where it's a temporary hide. Now I've created a hotkey for isolate using the letter I on my keyboard. So if I select the body and I press the I key, it's going to hide everything else. You can see it's going to the isolate mode here. And then to exit isolate mode, I can press escape. Sorry, press exit isolate, and that will take me out. Now to add that hotkey, right click on Command Manager, go Customize, go to Keyboard, type in search for isolate, and then you can see View Isolate and my shortcut, the I key. If you want to add your own shortcut here, click here, press the key on the keyboard, press OK. Done. Now, can I press Escape here, or is it going to override? No, it doesn't want to put it in. Never mind. Okay, so I say that because here, I don't want to see anything else when I'm trying to do these ribs on the side. So what I can do is select that body, press I. It's just going to temporarily hide everything while I'm working on this part. So now it's very easy for me to add the rest of my features to this part and get everything in that I need. So I'm creating the rib. Now when you're doing a rib in a file where you have multi-bodies, you do have to select the body to add that rib to. And I've seen some issues with that in the past, so just be wary of that. If you do get problems, sometimes you have to be sort of extra careful with what you're selecting. So we've been through all these steps before. It shouldn't be anything difficult here if you've followed their previous projects. Pattern, okay, and last one, we'll fill it on the edges. Cool. Now I can press exit isolate, go out, and I can see my finished parts. Very nice. I'm just going to rename that body. So we have now done the bulk of our modeling. There are some small details that we can still add. A couple of things like the text on this reinforcing plate and converting our form bracket here into sheet metal, adding a fillet to the edges of the bush here. A couple of small things. We're actually going to do those in the child parts that we're going to create in a minute. What you might like to do sometimes is complete your multi-body part file so that it looks like it's going to look in an assembly or when it's finished. So we can mirror some of our bodies here using the right plane and the mirror feature, press OK, just to get duplicates of those bodies and see how everything looks. At the same time, we also could do the same with the bush. So at the moment we've only got one at the top, but there should be a second one at the bottom. A tool I'd like to show you here, similar to the mate tool in assembly mode, is the Move Copy Bodies tool in parts. That can be found under Insert Tools, Features, Move Copy. I've made it as a shortcut, Alt-M. I can select this body here, the bush, and I'm going to make a copy. I'm going to make a copy of it first, and then what I'm going to do with that copy is do another Move Copy Body, but this time I'm going to uncheck the copy feature. And so I uncheck that box. I click on Constraints, and what I'm going to do is just hide the other one for a second. So I'm selecting the right one. I'm going to select that inside face and the inside face of the wheel and add a mate, which moves that bush down to that bottom section there. So now I have two bushes. You can see one at the top here, this one, and one down the bottom. Right, so now minus the hardware, so minus the screws and the nuts and bolts, this is pretty much a finished pulley. All right, so before we export, what I want to show you now is just a little trick for turning on and off those features that we've just created for mirroring and copying parts. We're going to use the suppress features tool to do that. You click on a feature in the feature tree, and on the shortcut bar here is an option called suppress. When we press that, it's going to suppress that feature, which is basically turn it off. Now you can do that for any of your features, but you'll find that if you do it for stuff early on, it's going to roll all the way down your file if other elements of your modeling have been related to, those features. All I want to do it here is just for these last couple, because when I'm exporting, I don't want to export duplicates of those bodies. I want to make the duplicates from one part file in the assembly, so it's easier to manage, okay? And if I had to make changes, or I was changing some features of those parts, I'm not changing it for multiple files, I'm just changing it for one. All right. So I'm going to suppress those to start. Now the next step, we're going to split this now. Okay, so it's all well and good creating a multi-body part file, but typically if you were going to like a manufacturing or prototyping sort of phase, your suppliers will want one body in one file, either 3D print or some CNC or laser cutting, one body in one file, unless you have a really good relationship with them and you can tell them in other ways through like a CMF document or drawings exactly what they need to do. I have done that before with suppliers I've built strong relationships with. Typically, though, to avoid doubt, to avoid any confusion, make it easy for them by giving them one part, one file, and saying this file is for this part, I need this quantity, this material, this finish, this process. My recommendation. So we're going to split these into 7 parts. Now, I would suggest first, before you do that, is you create a folder. I'm going to show you the folder that I've created for this. Okay, this one here, multi-body 3, currently empty. I'm just going to copy that directory and come back into SolidWorks. There's a few ways of splitting, and as we get into additional tutorials, we'll look at some of those further ways of splitting. On this one today, we are in a position where all of our bodies are renamed as our parts. As they stay like that, it'd be really nice to split and save them out using the Save Bodies feature. So I'm going to go Insert, Features, Save Bodies. I'm going to press Auto Assign Titles. When I do that, you can see each of those names is matching the current description or current name assigned to the body in that Solid Bodies folder. So that's this one here. Right, so that's really neat. I also want to press here, Create Assembly. So I'm going to go into my multi-body file and I'm going to create a name for the assembly, press Save. And what that will do is split each of these bodies into separate part files and then create an assembly and bring all the part files back in, if it works. Let's see. It's processing. Okay, now we can't see anything immediately except for this Save Bodies feature here. Now that's important because of all these parts that we've just created and the assembly that we're about to create, if at any time we come back into this original master file and we delete that Save Bodies feature, everything else is going to disappear. All right, everything is derived off this and derived off that Save Bodies feature. So there's some risk to this method. All right, Control Tab, flick between windows. And here is my new assembly with each of my parts you can see in the feature tree, okay? And they are all fixed in place. So we've been through that process before of fixing and floating parts. We're not going to do that again. What we will do is mirror some components, but before that we will add our text to this part. I want to show you that process. So what this part looks like now, like the reinforcing plate, in our feature tree we can see that it is a stock part pulled from this Pulley multi-body file. And the default in brackets means the configuration of that file. So if we wanted to go back, let's say we just open up this file and we're trying to find the original reference, I can right click on that feature and I can go edit in context, and it's going to take me back to the original file. And now in this file, if I made changes, let's say I just put a big hole through the middle of this body. I'm going to show you something pretty neat here. Okay, there's a hole in the middle of that part now. I'm going to save it, Control Tab back. There's no hole here. You know why? Because that cut extrude is happening before the Save Bodies feature. If I drag the Save Bodies feature below it, save again, Control Tab back, that hole now exists. So it's really important your order of your features in that feature tree. And you think about that for different times you use that Save Bodies feature. If you were going to be doing more editing in this file here, Save Bodies might not be the way to go. It might be using a more specific parent-child process, which I will show you in another tutorial, another day. So close that file. Back in here, all I want to do here is the text. So we'll get that done. Just construction lines, fully defined. All right, with a little extrude. And this is important just for the mirror feature that we're going to use. All right, so here we've got that on the correct side. Now we're going to use, in the assembly, we're going to use right plane. And we'll go to assembly, under linear component panel, we're going to hit mirror components. And we're going to mirror that side plane reinforcing plane. Now we could press the tick here, but these parts aren't symmetrical. So what can happen sometimes is that fully defined text doesn't line up properly on the other side. It's been reversed or upside down or back to front. Best thing here is to press the arrows and keep going through the selections until you can get the right preview. Now this looks pretty good on this example here because the text is on the outside, okay, in that purple preview. So I'm going to press OK, and now that's really good. Cool. So next steps, I'm just going to hide or isolate again those two parts. So in our assemblies, a trick for creating duplicates of parts is hold your control key, click on a part and drag. And then I'm just going to add some mates here to make that bush to the wheel and the rest of the assembly. All right, I've got that one in. Cool. And our last step is our nuts and bolts. Let's see if we can just drop those in from our toolbox pretty quickly. ASI, bolts, X head. This one will do. Very nice. I'll do 2 of those, thanks. And then some nuts to match. Yeah, that's good. That is also good. And there we have it. Beautiful assembly. Very bright there with all the lights on. So many lights. It's going to plain white. That's a bit better. Yeah, nice assembly. All driven from our original skeleton file. All right, another thing I just want to show you is with the form bracket. You know, with that kind of part that's been brought in, the other thing we can do to features like sheet metal parts is convert them. Just like we did in the original Pulley project. I'm going to select a face here. I'm going to select my bends. All right, so that's another way that, you know, we could create the geometry in one file, split it out, separate file, and then we have our sheet metal features in this file here and not in the original. But the function of the part, exactly the same. Cool. So guys, hope you like that tutorial. Thanks so much for watching. I'd love to hear, you know, what you thought of it, what aspects you think I'm missing that you'd like some more content on. I'd really like to start responding to what you guys need to learn. So shorter tutorials, longer tutorials, or more specific. I do have a list of projects that I'm going to get to. I've got some back catalogs still to sort through and edit and post here on the channel. But really want to hear some feedback. So please reach out in the comments, send me an email, let me know what you want to learn, what you want to see tutorials on, and I'll get something out for you really soon. Thanks for tuning in.